here in New York. And this guy at NYU caught on to what I was doing. It's like, I'm going to hire you. So I started teaching at NYU. Then I also do some stuff at Columbia. And I also teach all my stuff directly through Spodek Academy online. Then separate from all of that, I do a lot of speaking, a little less now during the pandemic. My blog, please check it out. It's, hopefully you did check it out. That's me swimming across the Hudson River, by the way. And I've started about a couple of years ago, the Leadership in the Environment podcast, where I apply the social and emotional skills of leadership to the environment. It's front page news, and I think it's a necessary thing to do. And it's actually an example of where I've applied initiative in my life. I practice exactly what I teach to others. I'm a best-selling author. My first book, Leadership Step by Step, became a #1 bestseller. And today I'm going to be talking about stuff in initiative. Both books are the book versions of the courses that I've taught at NYU from undergrad through MBA all the way through executive training and teaching in the workplace. Anyone who wants more, joshuaspodek.com/bio. It's all there. And I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to start off with a story about Raphael. He's the opening story in this book. And when he came to me, he's got an MBA. He works at the time he worked at a small media company. And he did great work. He liked his work. He would go to his bosses a fair amount with ideas that he thought would be valuable. And he would write up proposals that were just fantastic proposals. And they would always say, this looks like a great proposal, we'll think about it. And they never got back to him, and none of them got implemented. And the reason he came to me was he said, Josh, I have to start a new company. I can't deal with this. I want to have some strategic voice. I want to have high-level responsibilities, and it's just not happening. And so I want to start something on my own. So I said, great, that's what I do. I'll start working with you. And we started doing initiative, the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about in the next hour. And one day so we would meet an hour a week, and we'd talk about what he had done, and I'd start him on the next exercise, the exercises I'm going to tell you guys about. And one day at the beginning, he says, Josh, I don't need to start a company anymore. And I said, why not? That's what you came to me for. And he said, all right, you and I have been working on starting something new, but I've been taking the skills that we've been working on, and I've been going back, and instead of proposing to my bosses, effectively take it or leave it, I'm doing these exercises with them, treating them as the people, the funding sources and so forth. And I'm involving them in the process. I'm getting advice from them instead of asking for judgment. And last week they said one of the projects that I had originally proposed to them a long time ago, I shared with them the problem, my ideas for solutions, and all the stuff that we've been doing. And they said, this project is yours. You have authority, you have responsibility, here are the resources you need. And now he wanted ownership. In principle, ownership in stock would have been nice, but what he really wanted was responsibility and authority and resources to make something happen. Did he want to file with the state? Did he want to find benefits programs and things to hire people? That's not really what he wanted to do. And so he was able to take initiative, in his case, with his bosses and not leave the company in the first place. And so I want to frame this as, when I started writing this book, my publishers were like, you must put the word entrepreneurship on the cover. That sells books. But over the years, I've realized that people keep doing this stuff. They get job offers, they get offers and some of it is not to for-profits. People start nonprofits, people start community organizations. And my feeling is that being able to take initiative, the most common way people apply it is to start companies, but many people don't. And I believe this is more general. And it's the set of underlying social and emotional skills to make things happen. And I'll talk more about that as we go. When I'm doing this in person, there's more time, I ask people questions, and I'm not going to do this interactively, but I hope people will just keep these questions in mind as we're going here. Is what brought you here? What are your goals? Is your goals autonomy, authority, making money, more time with family, security? What does initiative mean to you? What brought you here? Hopefully I answer it. If not, ask me at the end. Is your focus on entrepreneurship? It could be on hobbies, it could be passions, it could be lots of different things. Did you read the book? If some people have read the book and they're interested in getting some more backstory to it. And now the question for the volunteer whose name I didn't quite catch, but what was the name of the person, Peter?
Achal.
What?
Achal.
Achal?
I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
You are
Achal.
Achal, A-C-H-A-L.
Achal.
Yes.
Have you ever seen the Westminster Dog Show? Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I have maybe seen some clips in 5 or 10-second spots, but I haven't seen the whole show in one go.
That's probably all we need. What do you think of when you see or hear of, what does the Westminster Dog Show make you think about? What's it about?
It looks to me from what I've seen as though there are owners of dogs who are proud to display the skills that either they have trained their dogs to have, or that some dogs genuinely have, and they're trying to win a competition where their dog is the cutest, best, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's a show for owners. And the dogs, is it for the dogs? Like, do the dogs enjoy it? Do they get?
At the first level, I would say maybe not, but if somebody has been doing something for hours and hours and hours to get prepared for something, I doubt they very much mind it either.
Okay, so thank you very much. That's what I was looking for, is that most people have something similar. It's a show that shows these things off, and it's not really for the dogs. The dogs are kind of an afterthought. It's more for the advertisers, maybe for the viewers. And when I think of the Westminster Dog Show, I think of this Westminster Poodle. Now, it's not the only way to own a dog. I think some people like having a Westminster type dog show. Personally, I grew up with a poodle when I was a kid. Here's a scan of a picture from like the 70s. This is my dog, Jake. And Jake, I don't think they would have let in the building for the Westminster Dog Show, but I had a lot of fun with Jake. We would get in the mud and play around. And I think that if the only way to own a dog was that you had to have a Westminster type show dog, and it was all about prancing jauntily around, I think not many people would have, not nearly as many people would have dogs. And actually, what I think really illustrates it is that, like in the hunting dog category, the winner is the dog that most fits the definition of what a hunting dog should look like. If it can hunt or not is not part of it, and probably has never hunted, because that's not what it's supposed to, that's not what wins the award. The reason I bring this up is that I believe that we have turned entrepreneurship in this country into the Westminster Dog Show. That is, we have these business plan competitions where people show off what it's supposed to look like. Like Shark Tank is really more for the sharks. It's like when you see the advertising for it, it's the sharks that get shown, not the guests. And one of the effects of this is that this is data from the New York Times, originally coming from the Brookings Institution. We are in the lowest period of companies starting up since the 70s. And sometimes when I show people this data, they argue with me. Now, it's not my data, but it's hard for people to believe because they feel like Google and Facebook are so much in the news, and Uber, and there's all these, well, not so many IPOs right now, but they feel like there's a lot more entrepreneurial activity than there is. It's covered in a certain way, like the winners of the dog show might be covered, but the actual numbers say that we're in a really low period of starting companies. And it's not just the United States. Here we have several different countries, and it's going down in all of them. For that matter, in terms of size of companies, small companies are a smaller number. There's fewer small companies, again, also since the 70s. A lot of people don't believe this. It's kind of hard to believe, but we're covering stars, but not the actual numbers. And I found that people who take initiative and start things off, they live more passionate lives, and they love what they do more. So why is it that we see so much coverage of what looks like a lot of entrepreneurial activity, but not that much? So there's a couple different things. One of them is that there's media. Shark Tank and its peers, they profess to promote entrepreneurship, but they're actually promoting drama. And I have absolutely no problem with drama and entertainment. I love being entertained, and I have no criticism for Shark Tank for being great entertainment, or its other peers, movies like The Social Network and things like that. I love them, but I do not confuse them with actually promoting entrepreneurship. There are going to be a lot of people who could take initiative, who could be entrepreneurs, who aren't into such flashiness, and they might be turned off. There might be people who are into flashiness and might think, oh, I'm going to love that thing. And so you got a lot of mismatch between the people who could take initiative and people who do take initiative and what brings success. also in education at all levels, it tends to be more academic and abstract. Teaching, I mean, in entrepreneurship, you do have some entrepreneurial classes that teach not just theory, but that's rare. It's much more teaching to the test, especially when you get into the K-12 space. So by the time people are graduating high school, often college, you can pick a major, that's it. Within the major, you can pick a few courses. But there's a lot of lecture, case studies. Certainly that was my experience in business school. Now you might point out, what about all these business plan competitions? Well, a lot of business plan competitions, they tend to select venture-backed, high-growth, IPO-bound type projects. Now, of course, that's not the only thing, but often these things have funding sources, and the sources tend to be places that want to see IPOs. They tend to be places that will benefit from the winners eventually IPOing or having some sort of exit. That's not necessarily the best thing for the people to take initiative to take their courses. As an example, The Lean Startup, a book I highly recommend. Well, in certain cases, I'm not sure if people know this book, but it's one of the big books in entrepreneurship. And this is a quote, I believe from chapter 1. It says, once a team is set up, what should it do? What processes should it use? How should it be accountable for performance milestones? These are the questions the Lean Startup methodology is designed to answer. Now, not everyone has a team when they start. And the Lean Startup, there's a course at Stanford, and here's the course description. And I want to point out that it says, they're going to have you iterate your idea, and to apply to take the course, there's team applications. So once a team is set up, your idea team, for a lot of people, the idea and the team are the hard part. And they're filtering out people who don't have an idea and don't have a team yet to start. Now, in principle, you can start and join someone else's team. But generally, they're saying you have to have a team and you have to have an idea. Now, there are a lot of people who have ideas in teams. They tend to be not only, but a lot of STEM types and maker type people. And so I believe that the applications that they get for these courses and the people who buy the book and the people that the book is for are STEM types and makers and tinkerers and people who are really into the latest technology type things. I believe that because they have this filter of saying you need an idea and a team, that the people who apply, they're going to get a lot of STEM people who apply and a few other people, but not as many other people. And so I think they feel most innovation and most initiative comes from STEM types. And so I think they feel like they're serving the market pretty well. Now, I think that because, and what I see from my courses, I've been teaching this course for a while with a lot of students, is that most people don't have ideas in teams, but that doesn't mean that they can't be very great initiators. If you take away the filter, I believe it looks more like this, and that they are simply not seeing this many other people. I mean, I think it's the number of STEM jobs in this country is something like 5%. So I think that there's 95% of the people, something like that, that they're not reaching. This is a market that I believe is underserved. There's a key contradiction that I find. When I ask a lot of people who say they want to start something, I ask, why have you not started something? You want to start a company, you want to take initiative. Why haven't you started? And the number one answer that I hear, of several different answers, but the number one answer that I hear is, I don't have an idea. If I had $1 million idea, I would start it, but I don't have an idea yet. Now, if I ask people who have initiated something, which could be a company, but could be some other project, when I ask them, is the idea that you're doing now the idea that you started with? Almost never is the answer yes. It's always iterated, it's always changed, often very significantly. And if one thing starts people and the other thing stops people, if the same thing starts one group but stops others, that tells me it's not the idea. I believe that it's the underlying social and emotional skills to develop the idea, to attract teammates, to be able to meet the people, to be the resources. And these are social and emotional skills that's where ideas come from. Not the final idea, but at least a seed idea that you can get the project going with. And we know how to teach social and emotional skills. Not the only way, but the way that I know how to teach them is practicing the basics. If you want to learn to play the piano, you can take all the classes in music appreciation that you want, or music theory, or music history, but ultimately you got to get your fingers on the keyboard. And I have developed a set of, it's the equivalent of musical scales for piano, but it's for how to develop the social and emotional skills underlying how to take initiative. And this is what I've been developing and teaching since the 90s. So I told the Raphael story. I'll skip Grace just because it's quick, and I want to jump to Jonathan, partly because, so Jonathan came to my class, and he got his law degree at Penn. He was a practicing lawyer, making multiple six figures a year. All I knew was he was a guy in my classroom. I later found out that he had gone to his mentor and said, you know, I'm making good money and got a great career, not that passionate about it. And his mentor said, take a class, there's some classes at NYU, take one. So Jonathan didn't know me, didn't know my course, he just took it, said it looked kind of interesting. And it transformed him. He did the exercises in the course that I'll describe to you. And well, let's see, long story short, he did the exercises, didn't know where it was going to go, and ultimately created it's an online program to help people who are trying to declare bankruptcy. It's become more and more expensive to declare bankruptcy. And he basically it's like TurboTax, but for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is an extraordinarily important part of capitalism. And I believe that's partly why he got funding from first Harvard, but then Mark Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt from Google. He then got into Y Combinator and spent some time out in California, and was also named by the ABA, the American Bar Association. His program was named one of the top 20 online programs for, I think it was 2018. And actually, I've been in touch with him recently. He's now doing the same thing for legal immigration. That has become very difficult too. So he's now onto his next venture since doing this program. And in terms of, he and I have become friends now. And in terms of the passion that he has for what he does, it's like through the roof. Is he making the money he was making before? I don't think so, because these are nonprofits, but he loves what he's doing. And he can always go back to what he was doing before, but he likes what he's doing now. There's lots, I have countless other stories of people like that. Going back to education, I find that schools tend to tell you, certainly K to 12, for most of our lives, here's what to learn. Learn it in this order, learn it this way. In 9th grade, you learn algebra, and 10th grade, you learn geometry, and here's how you learn. Do well on this test, fill out these bubbles. And now it might give you a lot of information, but what it doesn't do is have you pick your priorities. They tell you what's important, and you just have to go with it. If you don't challenge yourself to find out what's important to you, you don't develop the skills to understand what's important to you. And how I see this played out in my course, most people who take my course have never taken an active experiential course before. And so when I give them early on in the exercise, I say, pick a project to work on, pick a field to go into. Many don't really know. And for a while, for example, a lot of people would pick, they want to do like a Bitcoin app or blockchain app. Now, blockchain apps, I don't know, they didn't exist for so long. So how could it be that so many people really liked it? I think not because they looked inside themselves and really knew this is what I really want to do. I think a lot of them thought, this is something that can make me a lot of money. It's kind of trendy. My friends are kind of into it. It's making the headlines. So I'll do what's popular. A lot of people would pick things and they would tell me, this is, my parents wanted me to go into this area. They weren't picking things for their reasons. So students kept choosing things that they didn't like. If you don't know your priorities, this pyramid here shows a hierarchy of interests. Most of us there are a lot of things that we're kind of interested in, but ultimately, if we really did them for a while, we'd find that they were passing fancies. They might, we might like it for a little while, but we don't want to do it for our whole lives. There's a lot of these things, many, many passing fancies in life. They distract us. Then there's some things that are fewer of, that are hobbies, they're rewarding work, stuff that we really like. But then there's fewer of those, but still a bunch. And then there are a smaller number of things that could really be someone's life passions. And these are rare. There aren't so many things that you could start doing that there's a pretty good chance that 20 years from now, you still want to do it, and that you have no regrets for having said no to other things in order to do. The thing is that if you don't know your priorities, you can't tell passing fancies from life passions. That means if someone says to you, as I do in my course, pick an area of interest to you, it's kind of like sticking your hand in a bag and picking something out, and they're all the same to you. Most people pick the first thing they get as a passing fancy. If you start working on it, that's just the numbers. If you have 50 things and only 2 of them are passions, the odds are that you're going to get a passing fancy. So a lot of people, they start with passing fancies and they get just they get a certain distance and they realize, oh, I don't really like this. They might pick another thing and they realize, I don't really like that either. And so a lot of people start off, but they don't really, you know, they look at like Bill Gates and think, oh, that guy got such a great thing. He must know his passions. He must be, you know, if I were lucky like him, I'd do that, something like that. There's still nonetheless great value in working on a passing fancy, because if it's of some interest to you at all, as you work on it, even if that project is not going to endure for you and last for you for the rest of your life or even for years, you can use it to learn skills. And when you learn the skills, this thing happens to people is that they start feeling like, I could make this thing happen. I could really do this thing. I could really become successful in this. Wait a minute, if I succeed in this, maybe I don't really want to succeed in this. But then they start realizing, wait, if I can succeed in what I do, and then they start realizing there are other things that they wanted to do. And students kept coming to me and saying, I'd like to do it on this instead. And I say, you can switch, no problem. The one rule is that if you switch during, it's 10 exercises, you have to go back and start from the beginning to redo them, but it's always fast to redo them. And they would say to me, wait a minute, I can work on that? I can work on something that I really care about? So I say, yeah, you really can. And the more that people work on it, they find that no matter how esoteric they thought it was, there's always lots of people who like it. And it's never been the case that someone switched into something that there's no interest for. Sometimes I describe it with carrying on the learning piano analogy. Maybe you want to play some music, but you're not sure if you want to do jazz, you're not sure if you want to do classical, or maybe you want to do pop, you're not sure. Well, maybe if jazz is really what you love, if you start playing classical, well, you're going to learn how to play, and jazz will become more interesting to you faster if you're playing something, rather than if you're just sitting there trying to think of what it would be in the abstract. When you switch from the first thing into the second thing, you'll always like the second thing more, because that's the nature of switching. You wouldn't switch otherwise. And you'll find that not only is the passing fancy that you didn't like, does it fade, but generally the whole reason that you liked it. My friends thought it'd be cool. Oh, it's popular right now. My parents thought I should do it. Whole classes of passing fancies you'll get rid of, and increasingly you'll find yourself doing more and more passionate things. The things that you do will be deep passions, and you'll be able to say no to lots of other things. So exhausting categories of passing fancies is a major improvement to people's lives that goes well beyond simply the project that they work on. Even if they don't keep doing the greater project that they like, getting rid of this other stuff is a huge improvement to their lives. Another big concept that's a key part of this is getting advice from people, not judgment. You'll see that a lot of what I do is have people talk to others. Sometimes it's friends and family. Sometimes it's people in the field that they have access to. Sometimes it's reaching out to the very valuable people in the field. It's really natural feeling to a lot of people to say, here's this project I'm working on. What do you think? What do you think? Or is it good? That's asking for judgment. If you ask for judgment, people will judge you. And I don't know if people can see me in the image or not, but I'm kind of crossing my arms looking downward. And people look down on you and they think, well, I'm the judge and you got to work up, you got to perform for me. And it sets up this separation. If instead you ask for advice, not what do you think of this, but do you think there's any ways I can improve this? I wonder if you could suggest a couple things I could do to make this better. I don't know about you, but when someone asks me for advice, I'm happy to give it, even if I'm not really qualified. And after I give that advice, I feel like, if this person's thing succeeds, if it succeeds, it's partly because of me. And so I form a vested interest in them succeeding. And so asking advice, the more you ask for advice, first of all, the more you get, the more advice you get, and you don't have to use advice that you don't like. But also you form relationships. And so the three big outcomes of doing these exercises, of doing this initiative course, is that you get a project that you love, that it came from you and it serves a community that you want to serve. Another is that you develop these skills to keep doing it the rest of your life and to take initiative in other areas in life. And the other is you have a supportive, non-judgmental community of increasingly valuable people in the field you want to go into who have a vested interest in your success. So there's a big human element to this. It's very different about the Lean Launchpad stuff, and a lot of the dog show stuff is much more about show. This is about your development as a person, your development as a professional, and the community around you. A lot of people have this model that I just don't know what my passion is. If I knew what my passion was, I would act on it. And I would that would take me to the finish line. I just got to keep turning over rocks. And eventually I'll find my passion under one of them, and then I'll act. The thing is, finding a passion is kind of like falling in love. You know, there is love at first sight, I suppose, but in my case, it's always developed. There's liking at first sight, but then the real passion comes from working together and trying and failing and succeeding. And so I find that if you simply wait for a passion that you believe will be the great passion, you're going to wait a long, long time. Some get lucky, but I think that's rare. Other people think act. This is the lean launchpad. If you act, then you'll be able to reach success, and that will bring you passion. But I can speak from experience that I've had success in things that I wasn't really passionate about. And you have this weird situation where you can become successful at something you don't really like. And so if you simply act, sometimes you can get rich or notoriety, but not necessarily doing something that you like. And what I find works better is not to say you have to start with one and lead to the other, but a cycle where if you start off with a sense of a direction that you like, some minor sense of passion, and you take initiative, if you act on that, one of two things will happen. Either you like the passion more and you'll go through the cycle more and more and more, or sometimes you'll find I petered out that passion. I've exhausted what I thought might be a passion, but was really just a passing fancy. But you'll have the skills to restart. You'll identify new passions, and you can restart the cycle in a new area of life. And so if you develop these skills, you'll start this cycle going on in lots of different places in life and increasing your level of passion. Now, I'm going to describe the 10 steps of the exercise. I believe that this, I'll give you the slides and I'll describe this, and I hope that I give you enough to go on. The book gives you much more depth. People come to me for coaching, and so you can get, if you want really a lot more, you can come to me. But I want to make sure that you guys can do what I'm talking about. And if only you have the sense that you can, I believe that will give you the ability to take initiative in a lot more areas. And that might be to start a firm. It might be to get promoted. It might be to get a division within your company. It might be to get more responsibilities. It might be to change the nature of your relationships. There's lots of ways that you can apply this. The first is the most simple one. It's to write a personal essay. And the reason here is no one else has to read it, but it's to pick an area, write about a field that's of interest to you and why it's interesting to you and what initiative could mean to you. But the real part are 3 lists of 3 people, because this is a very human thing and I want people thinking in human terms. Make one list of the top 3 people that are role models for you. They could be alive today or they could be historical. For me, starting environmental things like Gandhi and Thoreau, Mandela were leaders, people like that, people, really great people who are touchstones for you. Then also 3 people who are living luminaries today that you could in principle reach, but you're not sure if you could. They'd be at the limit, but in principle, you might be able to reach them. So maybe heads of corporations, but don't just say like the CEO of some big company. Say the actual name of the person and conjure up that person's face. And then 3 people who are closer to the field than you that you do have access to. And they may not be really in the field at all, but at least 3 people that you could talk to. So I want you thinking of an area that's of interest to you and start thinking about the people in that area that are meaningful to you. Then, and by the way, the direction that you pick, it's a low stakes choice here. Some people think, well, what if I pick A, but B is what I really like? Again, if you pick A and you realize later on that it's not what you really like, you'll find that A becomes less interesting and B becomes more and more interesting. And you will switch to B. And when you switch, you won't regret the time you spent working on A. On the contrary, you'll look back at A with gratitude for having brought you to B faster. So it's not a problem if you pick the wrong thing here. And I've seen this happen over and over again. People just love that it gets them to the right thing or to something that they like more. Next is to write down in that area 5 problems and a solution for each. And I have a specific meaning for the word problem. A problem is you have to name at least one person or at least one group of people. It could be a category of person and an emotion that they feel that they don't like. And when I work with people as clients, I always tell them, I'm going to ask you who's the person or what type of person and what's the emotion that they feel. And everyone always misses on this, but then after they get it, they really get it. The emotion could be someone's dissatisfied, or it could be that they're impatient, or it could be that they feel, pick an emotion that people don't like. Impatient, dissatisfied, frustrated, confused. I'm sure you know lots of people in a field that feel these emotions, and name them. and then come up with a rudimentary solution for each of these problems. And no PowerPoint presentations. This is just write a couple sentences for each. So it might be, people going to work in the rain, their suits get wet, and a rudimentary solution is I'm going to put umbrellas in a vending machine in subway platforms. Is that something I would go into business to do? Probably not, but it's good enough for the exercises to come. What we're looking for here is not a great problem and solution. What we're looking for here is a seed, something that you can work on for the next exercises. So the outcome of step 2 is 5 problem and solution pairs. A problem is people who feel specific emotions. The next is to go to 5 close contacts. People who are supportive and non-judgmental. And you're going to say to each of them, hey, I'm working on this project. You could say you're working on a course, and I got these 5 problems and solutions that I think, I'd love to get your advice on them. I wonder if I could describe them to you and you could give me some advice on them. Most times people say yes, because people love hearing this stuff. And a lot of people feel like, oh my God, I can't tell them. People will judge me and they'll think these are stupid ideas or something like that. Overwhelmingly, people say, my God, people really like talking about this stuff. And it's very tempting when you say to them, here are the ideas. What do you think? You're not going to say, what do you think? You're going to say, I wonder if you could give me a couple pieces of advice. Actually, to ask 5 pieces of advice from them. It could be 1 piece of advice for each. It could be 5 for one of them, and 1 vote. So you're going to sit down. You're going to have 5 conversations, once with each person. You're going to describe the problems and solutions, and then you're going to say, can you give me 5 pieces of advice for these, and a vote. So the outcome of this stage is that you will have had 5 conversations. You can have advice, which you can act on. The 5th person you talk to may see something slightly different than the first because you might have applied some of the advice. And you're going to have 5 votes. And from the votes, and you don't have to follow the votes. You can do it based on what you want. But after this, you're going to pick one of the problems and solutions. And that's going to be the seed for step 4 and all the remaining steps. Step 4 is you're going to do the same thing as you did before, but with new people, slightly a little farther out. They might not be as non-judgmental and supportive, but they're still going to be people you know. Are they necessarily going to be the best people in the world to give you advice? Probably not, because your field might not be a field that's of interest to them. But they're still going to be able to give you advice. And you're going to sit down with each and you're going to say, I wonder if I could sit down and describe to you this project I'm working on. And if you could give me some advice, that would be great. And you'll be pleasantly surprised at how many people love giving you advice. And you want to give the description in a couple sentences. Here's this problem. These people feel this problem. And I think I could solve it this way. Can you give me a few pieces of advice? Try to get 3 pieces of advice from each. Again, you can act on any of the advice, but you don't have to act on any of the advice. But almost certainly, the second or by the 5th person, you've probably evolved it a bit. And you'll start feeling this is really taking form and you'll start liking it more. Oh, I forgot. Also, end each conversation with these 2 questions. Is there anything I didn't think to ask that's worth bringing up? Question number 2, is there anyone you know that you could put me in touch with that could help? Again, your close friends and family aren't necessarily going to be they're not necessarily going to have great advice for you. They're not necessarily going to know people. But in later exercises, when you're talking to people in the field, and especially valuable people in the field, sometimes when they answer these questions, it will be things that completely make your situation. When you're talking to those people, that's not when you want to be practicing these questions. That's when you want to know how to do these questions from experience, from having asked so many people before. So ask the friends and family members. You might get great answers, probably not, but you'll get the skills to ask with confidence when you're talking to people you've never met before, and they're the funding sources and they're the people who are connected with lots of people. Step 5 is you're going to talk to 5 people who feel the problem, and you're going to say to them, this is the problem and solution. What is the problem like for you? Can you tell me, how do you experience it? And listen to them. And the output of this is you're going to write down a few sentences from each of them in their words, their experience of the problem. I can tell you that no matter how much you think you know how this problem works, you don't know it like they do. And these are your potential customers, and the answers that they give you are going to be future sales copy. But more importantly, this is the number 1 step where people after this step take on a sense of ownership and inspiration, because somewhere along the way, oftentimes people hear someone will say to you, when's this going to be ready? When can I buy it? When can I join your thing? And that feeling of inspiration where you start serving others, it switches from being just something kind of interesting to you to something where you feel like I can change the world. People are waiting for this. I want to get this done fast. It changes people, this stage right here. It's not the only place where it happens, but it's the number one place where it happens. Now you've got a sense for who really wants this. By the way, you haven't spent a penny on anything here. So this is really stuff you can do easily and quickly. You don't necessarily have to build a model or anything like that. And so this is very quick. At this stage, you're going to do the same thing you did in step 4, but with people closer to your field. So it's not just friends and family. It's going to be people that do something in the area. So if you were going to do some music app, it could be a musician, it could be an app maker, it could be people who make lots of apps, it could be people who use lots of apps. There's lots of ways that you can define this. So you're going to talk to them. You can do the same thing you did with a friends and family member, only now you're going to get, the advice is going to be much more useful, and the connections that they offer you are going to be much more valuable. And you're going to do it much more successfully as a result of having done step 4 than you would have had you not done step 4. In fact, people here start feeling like it's easy, but if I'd asked them to do it before step 4, step 3, or step 2, they would not have done it at all. So it starts becoming more and more familiar. They start becoming more professional. Step 7, at this stage, you have a pretty good sense of what your business model is going to be. And so to write a visual model, it helps to, here I got to punt a little bit. I can't describe it in too much detail, but you're going to draw a circle with your entity in the middle. And you're going to draw circles for all the people or organizations that you do business with or that you interact with to do this. So it could be suppliers and buyers. If you need a permit to do it, it might be the government. And you're going to draw a little arrow. You're going to draw arrows between all the circles of the flow of value, which could be in the form of dollars. And this is going to be your working visual model. It's a quick step that's kind of fun to do. The output will look kind of like the things you see in bar napkins. And it's going to be a simple visual model. Amazingly, this helps people structure their companies a lot more than if they didn't do this model, even though it's so quick and easy to do. It also simplifies the next step, which, well, you guys are MBAs, so this is a pretty easy step for most of you, is that to do P&L, it's usually, for how far out you have to go, usually monthly for 2 years. But how far out you have to go to see how this company is going to work. And this is not accounting level. This is not professional level stuff. You're just going to get the basic idea of your general inflows, your general outflows. And the goal is that at the end of, you have to pick the time period, but usually at the end of 2 years, that the net profits are positive. Most of the time up to this stage, it's a little different with MBAs because we think more businessy, but most people by this stage, they think, oh, I got this greatest thing. It's going to be great. And when they actually put the numbers down, they realize, oh, it's not profitable. That's the beginning of this exercise. Then you have to go through and change the numbers and fix them until it does become profitable. The rule being that if you fix something and you think, well, maybe I was a little conservative on sales. Maybe I can get more sales than I thought. You can increase the sales number, but you have to also think, well, if that means you have to hire a new salesperson, or that means you have to take hours away from other things in your life, can you really make that happen? So this stage is really not so much about the numbers. You want to see if it's sustainable, if it's viable, but it really reveals details in a way that not doing the numbers, you never get those details. And the example I often give is if someone wants to start a restaurant, a lot of people think the recipes, like the food is the most important thing, but when you actually do the numbers, you realize it's real estate, it's salaries, and you have to know what your business is really about, where to really focus your attention. The next step is really a build up to the final step. So step 9 is a second personal essay, but I want to jump to step 10 and say why the second personal essay is so valuable. Step 10 is to do what you did in step 6 and 4, but now with valuable people in the field. You're going to ask advice for the most valuable people you can connect with. And you're going to ask them, you're going to say, I got this problem, and I got the solution for it. And I wonder if you could give me a couple pieces of advice to improve it. By this point, probably the valuable people, several of the valuable people are going to be people that step 6 suggested to you. And you're going to know them. It's probably not going to be so many cold calls. It's probably going to be people that it's going to be a warm introduction. And you're going to appear to them as someone who wants to help people in their field, is taking initiative to act on it, and has really solved a lot of things. They will have no idea that your idea may not have existed a month before. They will simply see you as a problem solver who wants to help people in their field. And unlike many people who come, valuable people are used to people coming to them and wanting things. Now you're going to ask them for advice, but you're not looking for a job or something like that. So they will answer your questions. Whereas if you came in and said, most of the time, if you ask for other things, they might send you off to HR or something like that. oftentimes in this stage, and why this book is called Initiative, is that people keep coming back to me and saying, I got hired, I got a job promotion, I got offered to get funded. And it happens often in this step, because when you talk to valuable people as a problem solver, valuable people want problem solvers in their lives. And you didn't come in there looking for a job, so they know you're not needy. And it keeps happening over and over again, that people, they get the funding offers, they get people wanting to join their team. And that's what happens when you're talking to valuable people. The step before that is to write a second personal essay, because over and over again, this happens. This can often happen in 2 months, usually a semester. So it's like 14 weeks. And people don't realize how much they've changed. And the value of writing the second personal essay and comparing where you are in terms of being an initiator is night and day for a lot of people. And only by writing the second, when I didn't assign the second personal essay, people still thought they were like they were in step 1. And they didn't have the confidence in step 10 to act as a peer. And so they would proceed as a peer. But with the second personal essay, they start realizing, wow, I'm a professional in this. I might not have gotten funded yet, but I know this thing. And people who know this thing, they look up to me and they expect me to get this done, and they're looking forward to it being done. And so doing the second personal essay enables people to do the 10 valuable people more effectively. And if you do these 10 steps over and over again, people get promoted, they get hired, they get funded, and they love what they do. Now, I could jump into more stories, but what I'd like to do is, I think, look at the time, it's 12:48, and I wanted to give time. I can give more stories, but I want to give time for people to ask questions. And I don't want to go over, but let's go there. Do people have questions? I haven't been looking to see if there are any questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's one from Adi. I think he's on the phone, but I think he can just unmute and ask the question directly. If not, I'll ask for him. You had the list of
Can you hear me, Peter?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Josh, thanks for the great
Yes.
presentation.
Thank you.
You mentioned 2 items that you should end the conversations with. I got the first to be, is there anything I did not think to ask that is worth bringing up? What was the second one? I'm sorry, I missed that.
The second one is there anyone that you know that you could put me in touch with that could help on this? You can
Okay,
dial
thank
it
you.
back a little bit and say, is there anyone that you know that I could, that you don't have to say that you can put me in touch with or that can help, but I like to add those in because I like the connections to be more high quality, even if I get fewer of them. But generally, do you know anyone who could help me on this that you could put me in touch with?
Thank you very much.
Sure, and I want to reinforce that I said this before, but the first people you ask generally won't give you very good answers. A lot of friends and family will put you in touch with people that they really like and they're really great people, not particularly helpful. Really, you're learning the skills so that when you're talking to valuable people and you're talking to someone who's like some big VC, that they'll put you in touch with other big VCs, they'll put you in touch with other funders or things like that. That's when you want to be experienced at asking this and expecting an answer. And if they don't have an answer, that's fine.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Peter, any other questions?
Yeah, next up is Bill. He has a question about personal essay exercise. Bill, do you want to go ahead? Yeah, if you can't connect in, Bill asked if you could review the personal essay exercise again.
Yeah, it's partly, the main things are to write down a field of interest to you and 3 lists of 3 people in those fields. Now, I want to point out, also put in what's interesting to you about taking initiative. Why do you want to take initiative? Is it for business? Is it for personal? Is it for fun? Is it for hobbies? Is it for your relationships? There's many different areas. Maybe you want to run for office. There's lots of directions you could go into. So pick something to start with, and then think of 3 lists of 3 people in those areas. Or in that area. So 3 people who are great luminaries, people who are just great heroes of yours. And they could be alive today, but they don't have to be. Then 3 people who are closer to the field, people who are valuable in the field who are alive today that you could in principle reach. I want you you should be able to reach them in step 10. And then 3 people who are in the field who are closer to you that you have easy access to. So I want you thinking about what's meaningful to you, and then people, names and faces if you can.
So Sabina had a question about confidentiality. Sabina, can you ask it directly? Because I think you'd probably be better at getting the gist of the question.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to find out, obviously, if you have a good idea, how do you make sure that there's no issues with revealing your great idea and having it stolen by someone if you're talking to as many people as possible to get this feedback and get their help, develop the idea?
So that's a great question. It comes up a lot. And there's a couple things. If you have an idea already and it's really patentable and for legal reasons you have to keep it confidential, then that actually has not happened yet. I haven't had that come up. I mean, if that's the case, Lean Launchpad might be the best thing for you. It's very rare. And there's a couple ideas in the book that are mental models that most people don't have, but when you get them, they're much more valuable. And the relevant one here is the idea of a lifetime comes once a month. Peter, do you remember coming across that one? It's most of the time, it's very difficult to hire people already, to get them to steal your idea and do it themselves without you. It hasn't happened in the people that I've worked with. And see, I don't want to give legal advice and I don't want to say like you can't be in a situation like that. But most of the time, you can ask the questions without giving out too much away. Talk with a lawyer to make sure that you're keeping the confidentiality if that's necessary to file a patent. But generally, you're going to move much faster and beat the competition by getting the advice and moving faster than not. If an idea comes up in the middle and you realize it's patentable, you might have to do some NDAs along the way. But again, moving faster is generally, you have to gauge this yourself. And don't take my advice here fully because this is just a short conversation. Very rarely do I see that happen.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Greg Fraser, he had a question about the number of people. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah, it's more a question of sequencing. I guess when you started describing the people who feel the problem step, it felt really late in the process. And I'm wondering if you could just explain why it's not in the middle of step 2.
Oh, by all means, talk to them early if you like. Usually getting the advice from others, there's a lot of iteration that happens early on when in identifying the problem and identifying the solution. So those early steps probably will move you, whatever you think of the problem and solution now, it'll probably iterate quickly when you get the advice from friends and family. Remember, those conversations with the friends and family they're pretty friendly conversations. I mean, it's not like you're spending money here. It's not like you could, in principle, do 10-minute conversations. Usually they lead to longer conversations because people like talking about this stuff, but they're enjoyable conversations. So the investment at this stage is pretty low. You could, at any stage, talk, like by all means, do them early if you like, but at least do them also at that stage after you've gotten a bunch of iteration.
Okay.
So it's descriptive, not prescriptive. You don't have to do it in that order, but definitely do them at that stage, even if you've done them earlier.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't see any more questions in the chat, but if someone wants to ask, we have 5 more minutes left. But just go ahead and unmute and ask Josh directly. And if not, I'll hand it back. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Well, I want to put a plug in that I get a lot of emails from people who are doing the exercises. They're doing, either they bought the book or they're doing the exercises on their own. I love hearing back. And if you start doing something, if it goes well, if it doesn't go well and you have questions, it would mean a lot to me, no obligation, but I'd love to hear how things are going. If I can help, all the better. If I can put you in touch with others who are doing something similar, all the better. So that's a little request, no obligation, but I'd love to hear back from people.
Joshua, I have a question. So at what point, a lot of these are, I think what's great about this, so approachable, right? You said it doesn't take any investment. It takes some legwork and some skill building or muscle building. But at what point do you actually start thinking it's valuable to have, whether it's a wireframe or kind of like a lean, just like a prototype or whatever it is for what you're going to do, starting to actually have something to put forward?
So that can come at any stage. And sometimes people have something that they really need a diagram to show or some screenshots to show in order to explain what they're doing. And that can be done along the way. All these steps are designed, you can reach the high level people without those things most of the time. I think of those as supporting diagrams or minimal viable products. Along the way, you can do them. I like doing these steps because you can get all the way up to valuable people. And I find that these connections and the skills are much more valuable than having something along the way. I think of those as things that you can show to support your description of the problem and solution. So if they help those conversations, that's when to put those in. You'd be surprised at how far you can get without those things.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any more questions, I'll hand it over to Jennifer to take us out. I think you're on mute, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
It's a common problem I seem to have with Zoom. Yeah, so that was terrific. Josh, thank you so much for your support, your time, your expertise, and freely giving it to the Wharton Club. Peter, thank you as well for going with this event and bringing it to our attention. And if there's no other questions, and if anyone has something after the event ends, just reach out to me and make the connections to make sure if it doesn't get across in this Zoom meeting, you'll get your questions answered. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I'll stay on a bit in case people have questions. Sometimes people like to wait until the end and go up to the speaker afterward.
Terrific. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Jeff.
Actually, I could tell that one of the stories if people want to stick around.
Yeah, that went actually pretty well. Anyway, go ahead. I missed, what was there was another story.
Oh, I see. Wait, Josh, my mic isn't working, but curious, you've seen examples of initiative framework and bridging with more technical solutions. Oh yeah, I mean, I've taught at the engineering school, I've taught at Stern, the business school, and it's the same exercises. And as you might expect, when I teach at the business school, it's much more businessy stuff. And when I teach it at engineering school, it's much more techie things. And when I teach at Wagner, which is the School of Public Policy, it's much more social. Then the class is called social entrepreneurship. And it's the same exercises. And it's weird. Like I teach the exact same course and I get wildly different look and feel to the solutions and the culture to the class, but it's the same exercises.
I thought actually of the stories that you had told, Grace's, she was the one who came back and then found a job. That was the one that resonated most to me out of the ones.
Yeah, I'll share a few words about Grace. So Grace came to my class. She was an undergrad and she took the class in the fall. She later told me that when she came in the class, she expected a regular class with writing papers and things like that. And in the first class, I said, you guys are gonna be out there talking to people and getting advice from people. She later told me she almost walked out of the class at that stage because that's not what she thought of education. She thought she wanted to write papers and she was really freaked out and scared because she described herself as an introvert. And she loved music and she wanted to do something music related. And she came up with an idea for how to do a type of, she wanted to go to these music festivals over the summer and couldn't afford like the $300 price tag for, I don't know, Lollapalooza thing. I'm not a kid, so I don't know what these things are. And she had an idea for what to do. And somewhere around Thanksgiving is when she was contacting people in the field. And someone at Governor's Ball said, we've been thinking about something like this, but we haven't had the resources to do it. Why don't you come in and talk to us about it? And she went and met with them, including the founder of the organization. So Governor's Ball is this really big event. And they said, if you want to do this, you can have this project. And she actually considered taking time off from school. Instead, by Christmas time, she started interning with them, working on the project that she created. By mid-spring, the webpage was up and they started taking, people started signing up for the program that she created within Governor's Ball. It's called Governor's Ball Gives Back, GBGB. And by the following, so now she's no longer in my course, but she's doing this project from my course at Governor's Ball. The following year, students in my class were talking about how they attended Governor's Ball through GBGB. And I told them that the class had begun, I mean, the program had begun by a student in this class, and they were like shocked. She was also invited to speak at Harvard. So she spoke at Harvard as a 19-year-old kid at the Kennedy School. And I happen to know someone in the field who was a C-suite person at Live Nation. And I remember being at this meeting between her and this was great. She's talking about her project at Live Nation. So it's this big publicly traded company. And I just remember at one point, he's asking her all these questions like, how do you do this? How do you handle that? And her answers are perfect. Every time she's like, oh yeah, that came up with Governor's Ball. Here was the problem. Here's what we thought about. Here's how we implemented it. It was a great structure. It was like, I thought she was doing great. And at one point he just pauses. He's like mid-sentence, looks at her, goes, by the way, how old are you? She goes, 19. He goes, oh, cool. And then just jumps right back into it. And so she did GBGB for a while, got to meet all these incredible people. Eventually, when she graduated a couple years later, she took a job at a Richard Branson firm. I forget the firm. So she's continuing to be a music professional. And, you know, the job interviews she tells me were just like, oh, you did that? When can you start? So that's Grace.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Josh. I guess I don't see any other questions out there. So
All right.
we'll wrap up. And if you could send me the slides, I collected a list of about 40 or 50 emails during the process. And if you send me your slides, I'll send it out to the list and copy you so that they can contact you with questions.
Great. And sign up for my mailing list if you like at the webpage at joshuaspodek.com. And keep in touch.
Thanks so much. I'm going to close out the meeting now. Thanks, Josh.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Stay safe, everybody.